Hello. I'd like to welcome you to the second session of our Lenten Bible study for 2021, and glad that you can be with us today. Our topic today is hope for catastrophic days. That seems to be go along with kind of some of the things that we're going through right now, especially as I stop and think about yesterday. Some people went to get the vaccine, and it was quite we might say, some people might call it a catastrophic day. Although they did get, some people did get vaccinated, but some of them had to wait 3 to 3.5 hours before they were able to get it. So that kind of goes along with this. But as I put this together, we're still in the middle of this whole COVID-19 thing. So yeah, we might be thinking right now, and after we have just gone through some sub-zero, well, not sub-zero, but below freezing temperatures. Well, yeah, some were sub-zero temperatures that we dealt with. Although right now, temperatures have come back up. But yeah, so we might, and for some people, especially down in Texas and other places, there were some catastrophic days that they had to deal with. So yes, this has been this. There have been, every day we hear the numbers about the number of people that are infected by the coronavirus and the hospital numbers. It seems like things are getting better. The numbers are going down, but there's still been people that are affected by it all. So we remember them at this time. It's almost been a year since we first heard about this whole COVID-19 thing, and there were people starting to be affected by it. And at the time we thought, well, it's only going to last a few weeks, a few months, it'll go away. Well, it didn't, and we're still dealing with it. We all know of someone that has either had it or has it, and even though some have received the vaccine, there's still many that have not yet received it. So it just kind of keeps going that way. Well, in our book study today, we're going to look at, as I say, a chapter that says hope for catastrophic days. And that kind of fits where we're at. In the book, he starts out by telling the story of a man who ran a marathon in 2004 in the Olympics. He was in first place and coming toward the end to the finish line when someone from the crowd came and ran up and knocked him down. He lost his place, but he got back up, got back in the race, and instead of getting first place, he got third place. He was able to get a bronze medal. Now, you'd think that he would have been upset by all that, but he wasn't. He was glad that he could still win a medal for himself and for his country. Many of us have had times when things seem to be going good, and then all of a sudden we get bumped off the path. And that's kind of where we're at with this whole virus thing right now, is things, might have been going pretty good. And then all of a sudden this thing hits, and it throws us for a loop. Things that are no fault of our own that just come along and throw us off course. And I think of some people right now that have started a business thinking that they had something good going and they're ready to really get this thing started, and this whole pandemic comes along and throws a wrench into the works. I also think of a lot of our churches that we've been having quite a few challenges lately, trying to get people to attend and trying to figure out how we're going to deal with things on a regular basis, and then this pandemic comes along and keeps people away as well. The author tells about how the Apostle Paul, how he ended up in prison in Rome. Here he was going out, doing, preaching the gospel, telling people about Jesus, starting churches, and then he goes to Jerusalem and is accused of blasphemy. So rather than being put on trial there, he asked, as a Roman citizen, to take his case to Rome. He appealed to Rome. Well, he ends up through lots of other things that he has to go through, being shipwrecked and dealing with a lot of other things. He finally makes it to Rome, but ends up in prison in Rome, stuck there. Wow. But he says in Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 and 13, I want you to know, beloved, that what has happened to me has actually helped to spread the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard, and everyone else that my imprisonment is for Christ. That even though Paul is in prison, he's able to preach the gospel, and he gives him a chance to write letters. You know, some of the guards that are there are chained to the guards, and they're stuck there having to listen to Paul. So, yes, you know, now how can Paul be upbeat after all that's happened? You know, he says, one of the things he said, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice, right? While he's in prison. It's because he has faith in God. And we too can have faith in God that he will work things out for us as well, even though things don't seem like they're going well. You know, one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Romans 8:28. It says, we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. You know, it doesn't mean that all things are good, but God can take those things and bring good out of the situation. You know, the author tells about another man who's put in a concentration camp during World War II. He escapes, but has to live off the land. He's starving, and he goes up to a house to ask for food. He knows it's going to be risky, but he goes anyway. And only to go there and find out the door's opened by a German soldier. And the soldier has a choice. He could turn him in, he could kill him, but the soldier has compassion on him. Instead of killing him, he gives him food and sends him away. He survives all that and ends up in Jerusalem, of all places, and comes across a pastor of a church that tells him about Jesus. Well, he ends up spending his life there and being part of that church, and he ends up being a greeter for that church. Then there's another story about after a mine collapse, a pastor is asked to give a few words of comfort to the families of the workers that are stuck inside the mine. The pastor has a bookmark that's been embroidered. If you look on the back of the bookmark, it looks like there's just a tangle of threads that just mass confusion. But you turn it over, it has the words, God is love. Sometimes in life, all we see is that backside. We don't see the side that God sees. God is working things out on the other side. Now we have the questions that go along with this. No one questions the fact of our misfortunes, but one would wisely question the wisdom of rehearsing them. Why is it unwise to mentally rehearse your misfortunes? Well, yeah, sometimes we think back about how things have happened and what's gone wrong. Does it do any good to think about those things over and over again? And my answer is we can't change the past, and reliving them is only going to make us sad. All right. Next question is, what personal misfortunes are you most likely to relive mentally? Oh boy. And what generally happens when you allow yourself to wallow in misfortune? My answer, of course, is, one time I took a job that really wasn't suited for me, and I'm wondering why I left the job I had before that I really liked. Well, part of the reason I did that is because it paid a little bit more, and we had a child on the way, and I was thinking I needed to make more money. And I felt bad about wondering what would happen if I had kept that job. I could think about that over and over again. But it doesn't do any good. I can't change that. Another question is, rather than count the bricks on his prison, okay, we'll start over again here. Rather than count the bricks of his prison, Paul plants a garden within it. He itemizes not the mistreatment of the people, but the faithfulness of God. How did Paul plant a garden within the prison walls? And what did he do? Well, instead of feeling sorry for himself, he looked at the good that had come from being in prison. He used it as an opportunity to share the gospel with the guards. Now, how can you plant a garden within the prison walls that seem to hem you in? How might God be able to take the evil that others do to you and use it for good instead? Well, my answer is, I'm thinking now about the COVID-19 situation, how it's keeping us from getting out into the community like we used to. I'm not able to go to the nursing home and visit people there or to their houses, not able to take part in some other community activities like we have in the past. I'm having to come up with new ways to reach out to people using email and the internet and the telephone, those type of things. We're figuring out new ways to do things. Number 3 is a question. Paul trusted the oversight of God. He didn't know why bad things happened. He didn't know how they would be resolved, but he knew who was in charge. If God is in charge, does that mean that everything that happens pleases him? My answer to that is that not everything pleases God, but God can work through it. And what does it mean that God is in charge? Well, to me, God may not control everything. God gives us free will, but God can control the outcome of what happens in the end. Okay, another question. It's not easy to find joy in jail. Not easy to make the best of a derailed life. But God sends enough Paul and Joseph stories to convince us to give it a try. Where it is most difficult right now for you to find joy, and how can you give it a try? Well, my answer is when I see the number of people attending church go down from almost 100 on Sunday to about 30, it does kind of make me sad. But I can get joy in knowing that the people that do come are here for a reason. And they must really want to be here. They aren't letting this thing give them an excuse not to come. And what have you learned from the stories of Paul and Joseph that would encourage you to make the best of some derailed plans or derailed hopes, delayed hopes? Well, for me, I have to go back to Romans 8:28, where we know that all things work together for good, for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. God will work things out in the end. Then we have learn a lesson from the man that got knocked down running the marathon in the Olympics. Don't let the bumps in the race keep you from the award ceremony at the end. Describe someone you know who's letting the bumps in the race distract him or her from finishing the race well. Well, I had an aunt who had an inoperable brain aneurysm. She was told that it could burst at any time and she would die. And for years she worried about that it might happen. After a period of several years, she finally decided, I might as well just go ahead and live my life. And if it happens, it happens. She did eventually die, but she didn't die from that brain aneurysm. She died from other things. What bumps in the race are threatening you to keep you from the award ceremony? What can you do today to refocus your eyes on the end goal of the race? Well, right now, this whole COVID-19 thing can get in the way. But I need to remember that God is in control and will work everything out eventually. In Philippians 1:12-21, I want you to know, beloved, that what has happened to me has actually helped to spread the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else in my imprisonment in Christ. And most of the brothers and sisters have been made confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, dared to speak the word with greater boldness and without fear. Some proclaim Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. These proclaim Christ out of love, knowing that I have been put here for the defense of the gospel. The others proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but intending to increase my suffering and my imprisonment. What does it matter? Just this, that Christ is proclaimed in every way, whether out of false motives or true, and in that I rejoice. Yes, I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance. It is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be put to shame in any way, but that by speaking with all boldness, Christ will be exalted, not as always in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me living is Christ, and dying is gain. So, how did Paul assess his Roman imprisonment? Well, it worked out for the spread of the gospel. What groups were benefited through Paul's incarceration? Well, the guards in the prison, as well as the believers in Rome. What negative circumstances could have caused Paul much anguish while he was in jail? Well, some actually wanted to make things difficult for Paul, but he didn't care as long as the gospel was being preached. What did Paul choose to focus on behind those bars? That the good news was getting out to others. And what kind of outlook for the future did Paul express? That he would be delivered one day, one way or another, either by release from prison or in death. And for what specific thing did Paul hope? That Christ would be exalted. How did Paul sum up his philosophy of life, regardless of what happened? Well, living for Christ, dying is gain. Hebrews 11:24 and 28 says, by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called a son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to share ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered abuse suffered for the Christ to be greater than the treasures of Egypt, where he was looking ahead of the reward. By faith he left Egypt, unafraid of the king's anger, where he preserved as though he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. So now we have the questions. What temptation did Moses face as an adult? Well, to be a son called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, and all the things that went with that. And what choice did Moses make? He chose to live like the Hebrews and not as part of the king's family. What gave Moses the strength to make this choice? Well, he was looking to the future and his faith in God. What kept Moses going despite the great difficulties after he made this decision? Well, Moses had faith, and it was by faith that he kept doing this. How did Moses' choice end up blessing a whole nation? Well, they were able to observe the Passover, and the firstborn children were saved. Well, that gives us our second Lenten study session. I hope that it might have been a blessing to you, and we'll stay tuned, and we'll have a third session coming along next week.